You are listening to the Independent Dealer Podcast with hosts Luke Godwin and Jeff Watson.
Hello and welcome to the Independent Dealer Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Dealership Consulting. Post-COVID, Luke. COVID's over. There's no more supply chain issues. There's no more complaints. Gas prices aren't $5 a gallon. Why am I still paying ridiculous money to transport cars?
This is one of the most overlooked aspects of a dealership. The transportation of units to and from auctions or to and from customers, depending on what your model is. I've been buying cars all over the country for 10 plus years, and I've been booking my own transportation. And, prices go up and down depending on the season. But let me tell you,
they don't ever go down. They only go up.
No, they go down sometimes. But this is such an overlooked aspect of your dealership that can make you so much money if you do it properly, or save you so much money if you do it properly. And today, luckily, we got some folks that know the business way better than I do, I promise you. And They are Autohoof Exchange, right?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, we've got Royce and Dana. Guys, introduce yourself to the community real quick, and then we are just going to hammer you guys with some questions, and you're going to tell us what we're doing wrong with transporting and how us dealers can do it better. So, Royce, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm Royce Neubauer, founder and CEO of Autohoof Exchange. I've been in the freight world for roughly 23 years. I've been in the vehicle logistics world for just over 2.5. In the vehicle logistics space it's interesting, it's broken.
It's the Wild West, Royce. It's the
Wild West.
I always describe it that way.
Well, you're talking about, shipping vehicles and the costs are continuing to climb or they're staying high, right? Well, in the freight world, freight contracts, shipping freight in the US have hit a 2-year low. So why is it the reverse in shipping cars, right? And we'd like to get to the bottom of that, but I'll let Dana dive in and introduce herself as well.
Yeah. I'm Dana Randazzo. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Autohoof Exchange, and I've been in transportation now. We're double digits, so that's where we are at now.
You've been in vehicle logistics for double digits.
Yeah, vehicle logistics, double digits. Then I was in freight for a couple of years prior to that as well. So and then I transitioned. So I went from freight, this beautiful, organized, and I thought I like a little bit of chaos in my life,
Everything's in a little box, a little shipping container, right? They all just kind of come prepackaged in those things. And I know what you're talking about.
They're timed by, we're talking like 15 minutes, right? Like if you're 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late for a pickup or delivery in the freight world, it's it. You're out. You lost your appointment. It's over.
How about 5 and 10 days late? I mean, come on, that's the world of automobile logistics. So, don't get me wrong. There are tons of things. I used to ship cars to customers all over the country. Back in the early 2000s, we were selling a bunch of cars on eBay, and we were using brokers because central dispatch at that time was essentially faxing. You would fax it in, it'd come back. Anyway, you'd post things. It was really weird. So anyway, I had a broker, and I kept telling our customers when we were sending cars all over the country, hey, it's not like shipping an envelope. It's not like you're FedExing this car. It takes time. So I understand it takes time, but why are vehicle logistic providers so used to over-promising and under-delivering? What's wrong with it?
I mean, from my perspective, like I said, I came in just 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years now, and I had no preconceived notions. I had no blinders on. I was shocked at the inefficient processes, the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, just in the space in general, right? So I started interviewing carriers around the country about what their expectations were. and their expectations were extremely low. I was shocked. They didn't expect people to communicate with them. They didn't expect to have correct information when going to pick up. There was a lack of trust from the shipper perspective on if the VINs were even there with certain shippers, right? So the expectation level on both sides, I thought, was lacking trust and lacking transparency. And in the end, you have way too few partners that control way too much of the volume. So there's a handful of very large fleets out there that consume most of the OEM freight. They bid it at a price that is not manageable and not serviceable for most carriers to survive. And then they broker out the majority of that freight and just drive a rate down that doesn't make sense. So when I just really started to examine it, we decided to take an approach that was more freight driven. Expectations need to be high. Transparency needs to be high. Communication needs to be high. And the expectation level needs to be high on both sides of the paradigm, the carrier and the shipper. And that communication needs to coexist together. I think brokers get in the way in this space way too much. It's just that simple. I think they're consuming way too much of the volume, and they're clogging up that communication and that trust factor across the entire industry.
And that's interesting. You bring up brokers, because 5 times out of 10, you post a car on Central Dispatch, you get a call from someone, and the person you think you're dealing with is not the end provider.
And 9 times out of 10.
I think it's more like 5 out of 10, but it might be 9 out of 10
for me.
And what'll happen is they'll say, "Hey, I'm going to pick your car up on Friday, and I'm going to have it to you Monday morning." Okay. And what shippers may not know out there is if a car leaves a Manheim auction, I know because I get a text on my phone when it leaves that auction. Okay.
Yeah.
So they're going to, and then they say, "I posted for 500. Well, we're going to need 600 to do that." And right then I figure it's probably a broker upselling the freight. And so I'll say, "No, I'm not going to do it." But anyway, let's say I do say they're going to do it. For one, they don't pick it up on Friday. They pick it up on Monday. And then I text them Monday, "Hey, when's my car going to get here?" I don't hear anything from them, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, "Well, I need to check with my driver." "Well, I thought you were the driver," right? So the broker side of it, I think you're exactly right, is really creating a problem. I got a question. When a broker is involved, whose insurance covers my car?
Yeah, I own a brokerage as well. I've been in the brokerage space for a long time. In the freight world and even vehicle logistics, we move cars as well on that side of the business. We're responsible. The carrier is outright responsible, number one. The carrier is their insurance is the responsible party. But if something happens and that carrier isn't able to take coverage, then the broker's insurance needs to kick in. Knock on wood, we don't have a lot of issues on that side of the business. And there's 2 things you have to look at there. If you're posting vehicles on a board that's not vetting the carriers or vetting who's pulling those vehicles off, then you're putting yourself at risk, Luke, right? Because you don't know who's insured. You don't know if their DOT ratings are secure. You don't know if they're even a legal carrier to be moving those vehicles, right? So I would be, it goes back to the wild, wild west of vehicle logistics. I think, there are some things that we've built into our product, and there's some things that we just have taken from the freight world that we just feel make sense. And carrier vetting is number one. You need to make sure that that is a legitimate carrier that's moving that vehicle, that have strong safety ratings, that have good insurance, and that they can insure that vehicle, because ultimately that carrier is who is responsible.
What we're acting like here is that freight movement across the country is not regulated. It's probably one of the most highly regulated businesses in the country.
Yes,
and that
100%.
And that the biggest problem with posting on a board, nobody's vetted. That blows my mind. And I know that I'm rolling the dice every time I use a new carrier, and probably sometimes when I'm using an old carrier. How do you get around that? what's the best practice if you are using a board?
Well, I would make sure that that board is vetting the carrier for you. There are technologies out there that have back-end processes where any carrier that's allowed to shop on that board or work on that board has to be vetted. And it's no different than working with a good broker. If you're working with a good, reputable brokerage, they should be vetting the carriers. If they're not, you're not working with a reputable brokerage. The brokerage process is very regulated. We have rules that, brokers have rules they have to follow. And if they're not following those rules, they're putting you at risk. They're putting themselves at risk. So if you're working on a board or posting on a board, and it's just a post and pray model, which is what most people have used for the past decade in this space, then to me, that's not a very, I think, safe way to be moving vehicles. Anybody that's involved in that transaction could be at risk. It could be liable if there's an accident of that nature, right? Except for the board, because the board is basically saying we're not responsible here.
Good. All right, guys, real quick, just to jump in here. I'm going to jump in on top of Luke and tell you about Primalend, because they are still a sponsor of the podcast. Can you imagine that, Luke?
I tell you, Primalend is a sponsor of the podcast. They're a sponsor of the independent dealer. They work hard to make sure that we know what the heck we're doing. If you see every convention, they're there. They're teaching us something. They're teaching us how to manage our cash flow. And if you need cash, in my opinion, they're the best one to go to.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So everything about convention and everything about my recent 20 group meeting was, guys, buy here, pay here is going into its season, right? Interest rates are up, banks are tightening, a lot of lenders are getting out of the market. Now is going to be a good time for us to go a little bit harder and build our portfolios over the next few months, years, whatever. So having cash to do that is like crucial. And I'm looking everywhere to make sure that I have enough to take advantage of this opportunity. So if you are looking, obviously call the guys at Primalend. Yeah, what I find sometimes is I go out to my normal carrier, my normal transporter, and if and I don't know what happens after that. I honestly don't know because I know when the car shows up at my place, he's the one that's taking it on the last leg. So I know he's the one dropping it at my door. But I don't know that he's the one picking it up from the auction. I'm under the suspicion that he's, hiring these out to other people. If they're outside of his normal leg, he's basically becoming a broker, a transporter becoming a broker to get these other cars. And I don't know who he's sending those out to. Is that something I need to be worried about? Do I need to be, as a dealer, do I need to say, hey man, if you're not the one pulling this from the auction, I need to know who is pulling it from the auction. Does it matter that I'm that involved, or is it?
If it were me, I would want to know. Right.
Okay.
And that the reason behind that is it goes back to the regulations of having a brokerage. If that carrier is literally handing that off to another asset-based carrier and there's no brokerage agreement or no alignment there, then the liability really falls back on you, the dealer, because you're the one that made the original agreement. Right. So
I definitely see in a situation where I'm like, this car didn't show up or this is damaged. Now I'm going back to the carrier. And then he's like, well, I didn't pick that up from the auction. I sent it to Bob's Transport. Well, wait, but I sent it to you. You're the one. It was at the, it's like this whole blame game thing that definitely makes me quite a bit nervous.
Right. You find out who's Bob's boss. Where's your certificate of insurance? Where is it? Where's your insurance?
Do they even have liability insurance? Do they have car insurance?
With like a little bit of technology in the transport, in this business, you could have a lot more transparency and a lot more reassurance, right? Like, and I know some carriers probably do this. They, you take a picture at the auction, you scan the VIN, you update the status, you update the location. You take a picture when it moves from one truck to the next, and this is all on a platform where the dealer, would be able to have access to it. Right now, it's like this whole I have to prove that bumper wasn't scratched at the auction, right? Yeah. I have to be the logistics guy to be like, wait a minute, I caught you, and then they're like, oh, you caught me, and then they have to I got to compare my pictures to their pictures if they took any, right? Like. it's this crazy game. And with my cars, it doesn't really matter. I mean, like you could probably flip a freaking carrier upside down and my car should look why is technology not more, even just from an asset tracking standpoint? Like, I would love to know where that car's at. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like this black mystery box where I send it out and then maybe 7 days later it shows up at my doorstep.
Well, that technology should be an expectation, right? There should be a standardization across the board when it comes to moving vehicles. And in the freight world, there is. You know, when I'm picking up produce, there is a set model that we follow on every single shipment. Every shipper has the same expectation. Every receiver has the same expectation. Every carrier has the same expectation. For some reason in vehicle logistics, that does not exist. So we've moved out to kind of create that standardization, and tracking is part of it. That's so simple. Tracking's been around for 8 years now. There have been hundreds of tracking apps that have hit the market over the past 7-8 years, that if you don't have a carrier that has a tracking capacity, I wouldn't load the carrier. If you don't have a broker that has the tracking capacity, I wouldn't load the broker, right? So that should be the simplest form of technology that you guys are utilizing. But then the inspection reports, the inspection reports should be uploaded, they should be digitized, they should be visual to you prior to that car moving. And if there is dings and dents that you don't know about, you should be able to see that through those pictures before that car ever leaves that auction or ever leaves that lot, right? So these are expectations that aren't consistent across the network that we're trying to make consistent, right? These should be expectations that every dealer has, that everybody that's buying cars as a consumer has, and that the carrier has the capacity to provide. Because these technologies aren't non-existent, they're out there.
So let's talk about other technology I think that's really lacking in the current environment in this logistics process, and that is payment. This is such a let me tell you just some of the things that we've had happen. So we post on the board, hey, this is check on delivery, right? Yep. Well, 10 minutes before the guy gets there, say, I need cash. Well, no, you sign this check on delivery, and that's what you'll get. Well, I'm not taking your car off the truck until you give me cash. Well, I guess we're just gonna I guess we're just gonna be in a stalemate here, because you're gonna
take it back wherever you're going.
I don't really care. But then also you write a check and you give it to the carrier, and next thing you know, you get these weird withdrawals coming out of your checking account. And those weird withdrawals are somebody that's kited your check. Well, wonder where they got those numbers from, because it happened the day after this. So should there be a standardization on, hey, we send it through this website. As soon as the delivery hits and we verify it's okay, you get your funds, right? I mean, how hard would that be?
It's not very difficult at all. There's companies out there in the freight world that are doing that today. It's another part of our product that we've built in, to where, number one, you guys should be able to see as a dealership what your spend is on a weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly basis of what your logistics spend is. We've sat down with dealers before and said, what's your weekly spend? What's your monthly spend? And they have no clue. They're pulling out stacks of W-9s to see which carriers they've written checks to, which drivers they've handed cash to, where's the petty cash, what's going on here. That shouldn't be your problem. You guys should be buying and selling cars, right? And the payment processing side should be simplified. It should be easy for the carrier. It should be easy for the dealer. And back to the payment side of this, though, a lot of carriers work specifically for brokers, because brokers are going to pay them quicker than a shipper will. They're going to pay them quicker than an OEM will. So if you've got a technology out there that's building in the payment side of it, it needs to be to the carrier standard. So if the carrier wants same day quick pay on delivery, once we see that proof of delivery, boom, they're paid. And then we're just sending our shippers, a weekly invoice, so you guys can see your spend, and you can see your spend even out of markets. If I'm buying a car out of Florida versus Georgia, or West Virginia versus Virginia, what is my transport cost going to be? Am I going to get the revenue back on that car that I want once that transport cost is taken care of? we should be able to, your transport costs should be able to help you understand where to buy cars, when to buy cars, and how to ship.
I don't even want to talk about the nightmare of the W-9 in this whole process.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is brain damage. 1099s and W-9s and all that. So
names. Every so often, if I buy most of my stuff through Manheim, right? And so if I have a car that I know is off the beaten path, I will just pay Ready Logistics, Manheim, in the purchase price to just ship it, right? And this last one took 2 weeks to get me, and it was like not that far away. Am I grossly overpaying in that situation? If I just say Ready Logistics, handle it, I'm going to pay when I buy the car and let Cox do it. Is that crazy?
Hey guys, hate to break in, but we got to talk about our boys at Buckeye. Jeff, do you have your reinsurance? Are you reinsuring everything?
Yes. Yeah. So I went over that just recently. I am my CPI product. So my collateral protection insurance, is where I'm struggling. I don't have good enough penetration on that product for the losses that I'm taking currently. It seems to be, I'm only getting the worst of the worst on that product. So I've got to change my sales process and teach my salespeople that this is the way to go for everybody, not just the ones that can't get insurance. Right.
Yeah, I tell you, I've worked hard on CPI this year, and we're getting better at it. Losses do come. It's one of those things. Reinsurance is there because you do have losses. If you don't have losses, I don't know what you're doing. Anyway, I was talking with Jason yesterday, and we came up with another thing we can reinsure in our service department. So there's always Buckeye's always looking for new ways to help you insure the losses that are coming. Hey, and I even wonder, Jeff, talking about transportation, can we reinsure our transportation? You never know if there's an accident during transportation. Can we set some money back just in case? Anyway, I'm just thinking outside the box.
I don't see why not. That seems like the most obvious insurance. If you're saying, hey, I'm setting aside in case my carrier's not covered, or in case I have a loss that's not covered.
Yeah,
that seems like a pretty obvious one.
You would think so. Anyway. Call the guys at Buckeye. They'll get you straight. They'll make you more money than you could ever spend.
I can't say because I don't have the specific example, right? But I think you waiting 2 weeks on a vehicle is that's just a wow factor for me.
Crazy. Yeah, crazy.
That's insane. You should never wait 2 weeks for a vehicle unless it's coming from Alaska. But I think that part of it is the lack of expectation from them, Jeff. That's why you're not expecting that car any sooner.
But what I'm saying is, are we under obviously Cox through Ready is marking up the cost 100%. That they're just brokering out to Joe Schmo Transporter. Because when Joe Schmo Transporter shows up and brought me my F-150, he gives me his business card and says, next time, just call me directly.
Yeah.
Right? Because he knows that I just paid $600 to have this car brought, and he dropped one off down the street for $300.
Right. But then not only that, maybe you did pay a good freight rate on it. Maybe you did pay a good trucking rate, but it took 2 weeks to get you there. What's your total holding cost? What's the depreciation of the vehicle?
Yeah.
How much did you lose in sales? That's your total cost. So many people want to just look at the cost to ship that vehicle and, hey, you guys are $100 more than this board says, but this board's going to take 10 days. You guys get it there in 3 days. What's better? Is it better to pay the $100 now versus the depreciation of the vehicle, the holding costs, loss of sales, loss of trust by your customers? I say get the car moved, get it on the
lot. What do you think your holding cost is?
Per parking spot, probably I think $26 or $9 or $26 or $29 a day. So it's a big deal, and dealers don't look at it that way. There's nothing worse than having a car that's already sold that you can't get moved, because I've had it happen numerous times. I've had people back out because they had to have it. So
even worse if it's sitting on your flooring line. By the time you get it there, you're already aged out and you're making curtailment payments, right?
Yeah, I would never deal with that 2 week deal.
The other thing I'd add too about the Ready Auto piece is that, and not to say about them again, I don't know their business or their model exactly, but what happens a lot of times is that maybe they put themselves in a box like, hey, you paid this amount, so you're going to be lower on the totem pole because that's the amount that you're going to pay. That's the amount that we were supposed to pay. So we're going to give you you're lower on, like I said, you're lower on that totem pole. You're not getting that in 3 days, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
They
what
kind
I
of
think
box
happened
themselves
here.
into that price.
Yeah.
So
No, they're like, oh, whoops, I guess no one wants to pick it up for that money. It's going to sit there. Right. And you're like, well, you told me someone would pick it up for that money.
yeah,
It wasn't me dictating the price. You dictated the price to me. So make it happen. That is definitely frustrating, because many times when I do post on Central, I got to go back and up the price, right? Like I throw it out there. I get it. No one's biting. Okay. Or someone calls and I'm like, all right, fine. Do you see our per mileage rates? I know it's not consistent across the country in all routes, because, right, you have hot routes going one way. Like, I guess if you're trying to get something out of Florida in the winter, it's impossible, and into Florida in the summer, I don't know what the snowbird.
No, it's just the opposite. It's a snowbird flight. In the spring, you can't get anything out of Florida, but every time, all the rest of the time, you can. But except for you can't get it down to Florida in the
winter time.
In the winter time, yes. Yeah. Well, the start of the winter. Yes, is there a number that we should be paying per mile to transport a car or truck? Is that a industry standard?
I wish I could say there is. It's just like any other commodity in this country. Freight rates fluctuate up and down daily, right? And it's market dictated. Like you said, the snowboard situation, as we know, is a challenge at times. Vehicles that are out in the middle of nowhere, off the beaten path, can be challenging at times. So there's no specific number. It is all market related. But what I'll tell you is there's technologies that are being created, including ours, that'll give you a better idea of where that moving target is, right? And I'll kind of let Dana kind of dive into that.
Yeah, when it's funny, you think about, is there a set number? Well, a lot of times you would think that shorter run might be a lower cost, and it's actually usually a higher per mile cost. If you're like in that inner city, or because it's those shorter runs that those drivers don't necessarily want. So, drivers are looking to fill up their trucks, right? So depending on what type of truck you have, it's a 4-car, to 9-car hauler. They want to fill up that full load. So it helps if, the more vehicles you ship or whatnot, that helps to bring the cost down. But it fluctuates all year round. Fuel surcharge changes all year round. We'd like to say there's a set rate, but I can say if you run similar lanes, or if you have drivers coming in and out of you that you get to know, that you get to learn, then is when you can start, maybe negotiating those rates a little bit more. So getting a little bit more pattern. I know with dealerships, that's a little bit harder. But like Jeff, like you said, if you're typically just buying from Manheim's, if you're typically buying those Manheim routes, maybe you can add something to it. And something that with our technology we've worked on is the whole goal is to, reduce miles and add more to these vehicles, to these carriers' trucks. So if you're buying, maybe it's an off lane for you, or Luke, or if it's an off lane for you or something like that. Well, our goal is to like fill up that truck. So maybe that driver's already going that route, right? And so you're like, hey, I just bought 2 vehicles from Manheim. It's a lane that you're not typically familiar with, but our goal is to have these drivers come onto our exchange, check out the lane, and say, you know what, I actually have 2 spots if I'm looking for 2 vehicles to move. So that'll cut the cost down. So it's like adding maybe those lesser vehicles, so it's not that full truckload, onto these larger truckloads. They're already going that lane. And so that'll help cut spend and cut costs.
That's an interesting thing. And I can ask you this, is this part of your technology? Because for me, I only I do a 500-mile radius, right? Because after that, I start saying, oh my goodness, I cannot spend more than, $500-600 to get a car here. Like, people are paying $1,000 to have a car shipped from Texas to freaking South Carolina or somewhere, like Florida to freaking Massachusetts. Like, is there kind of a dollar, or where it becomes like reasonable, but is there some sort of technology where I could be like, oh, I actually thought this was outside my market, but because it's such an empty route, maybe going from Denver to Southern California, I see so many carriers come empty right past my dealership. I could be buying outside of this mileage range because people just want cars and I can get a super cheap rate. Is there some sort of a matrix that can show me that?
Yes. And I'm glad you asked that question, because this is kind of what helped kind of conceive the idea of the exchange. Is in the freight world, you can't see empty opportunities inside of a trailer because it's enclosed and you can't see in there.
I
Here
drive
in
past
Metro,
them on the freeway. They're like
Yeah.
friggin' empty. Like, where are you going empty?
here
What's
in
going
Metro
on?
Detroit, we have auto carriers driving through our streets daily with empty spots on that trailer, and it was just driving me crazy. So as I started talking to different carriers and different shippers around the country, it was, man, I wish I could just find extra capacity. I don't need the full truck. I just need 2 spots. I need 1 spot. I need 3 spots. So what we've found is, let's just market that capacity together. Now, you and Luke may not buy the same cars from the same places, but they might be in the same region, right? And they might be going right past each other to a location that you're trying to drop off. And you don't need to share your data together, but if you had an environment, an ecosystem that just had thousands of opportunities out there that carriers could kind of pick and choose what fit on their truck on a daily basis, that's how you truly collaborate. That's how you become transparent. And that's how you start to really maximize capacity on these trucks. And we've seen that, a driver will pull into an auction in Memphis, and, it might be a 4-car hauler, and they were just happy to get 2 cars because it was taking them back to Cincinnati. Well, all of a sudden, 2 more cars popped up that were going to Dayton, Ohio. Holy cow, now this guy just filled out his truck. Each dealer is paying less per VIN because they're not paying for that whole 4-car hauler now. They're just paying for the 2 spots on that truck. So it's saving the dealer a little bit of revenue, and the carrier's making more money by filling up their truck. Now that's truly collaborative, right? That's truly, maximizing the empty miles, maximizing that capacity of that truck. And we're seeing it every single day on the exchange, where a driver will pick something up and just start heading down a route that made sense for them. And then all of a sudden a VIN will pop up in that route, and then the carrier pulls it off and they go pick that one up. And they just made more money, and that shipper is paying for 1 car spot. They're not paying for the full truck.
And so, as me, the first guy who booked 2 spots on that truck, if Mr. Shipper goes out of his way to pick up 2 more and my cars show up a day later, do I get a discount on my original contracted rate?
The mindset is that your vehicles show up on the time that they contracted, right? So we're monitoring the system kind of monitors that for you, and it's going to give you updates. So when a carrier selects a vehicle off the exchange, they're going to tell you, hey, I can pick it up at this time and I can deliver it at this time. And this is what I'm committing to as a driver.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what the expectation is. And as a shipper, you have the ability to flag that carrier as, you know what, this guy did not do what he said he's going to do. I don't want them having visibility in my opportunities anymore. Or you can bump them up and just start marketing directly to that carrier because you love their service. You love the way the driver worked, the way the driver communicated. So it goes both ways. If the carrier does what they're supposed to do, then you continue to work with them. If they don't, then you pull them out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just it was a DOT, it was a blown tire, it was a breakdown, it was why are transporters trucks always breaking?
I'd say I have so many transporter trucks
always
break
breaking.
down.
Whether they are or aren't, it's just such a good excuse.
I had one last week. Well, my trailer broke down. Well, on Friday, I said, well, you were supposed to pick it up on Tuesday, and it still hasn't left the auction. So I don't care that your truck broke down on Friday. But then they get mad, right? But this has been super, super educational, Jeff.
Yeah. Tell me this, guys. I want to ask one more question. So when I start using an exchange, whether it's you guys, Central, Ready, whatever, and then I take the carrier off the exchange because he gives me his business card and asks me to text him directly, what is the risk is there a risk in that where I just start dealing directly with a carrier now by text message or something?
No, I don't think there's a risk to it if you're vetting the carrier and you make sure that they've got the right insurance and they've got the right authority. That's your prerogative. And I think when you look at an exchange like ours, our thought process is never to get in the way of the transaction. Our opportunity is we're providing as a marketing platform for dealers to market their vehicles to thousands of carriers inside or outside their network. Doesn't matter. It's up to you guys to decide who you want to work with. And it gives carriers an opportunity to work with partners around the country that they didn't know that existed. They didn't know those opportunities were there. If they decide to work together, that's their prerogative. It's up to you guys. If you find a great carrier partner, heck yeah, I would reach out to them and I would communicate with them. But then I would also find a monitoring system that you can utilize that does what our exchange does, and it monitors that carrier's insurance daily. It monitors their authority daily. So if anything happens and they lose insurance or they get in a crash, all that's going to be flagged in our system, and it's going to protect you. So if you're going to work direct with a carrier, you need to make sure that you're monitoring that data, because ultimately, Jeff, if you decide to hire that carrier and something bad happens, they're coming after the biggest wallet, and it's probably not going to be that asset-based trucking company that has one or two trucks.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't even keep tires on it, let alone So is so much of this issue, I know as dealers, it's always like, okay, well, this guy will do it cheaper, right? Is this like a self-inflicted thing that we as dealers do to ourselves because we're always looking for the cheaper guy, and then we end up stumbling and we're like, well, this guy's a bunch of crap and he wrecked my car and didn't take responsibility. All shippers are dumb. And you're like, well, no, you just tried to find the cheapest one out there and it bit you in the butt. Are we doing it to ourselves sometimes? Yeah, the answer is yes. So it's like it's a race to a bottom. So there's just like that standard of like, if you use an exchange that has that minimum standard, right? Like
you can expect minimum standards.
Insurance, they've got to be professional. The cars are tracked. Then I can argue to bottom dollar. And yes, I might find it cheaper if I just grab Joe Schmo off the street, but I know within this standard of professionalism and quality control, I can try to find the best rate amongst these guys, right?
Yeah, and rate goes back to more than just the cost to ship that vehicle, right? Rate goes back to how quickly are you getting that vehicle on your lot? How quickly are you moving that car, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are just trying to pay the lowest amount and you want to wait 14 days, then that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
But if you have a system of record that's going to show you what the market rate is in that area, which our system allows for, then that's going to give you a good idea on how to price the vehicle prior to buying it on the shipping side of it, right? Mm-hmm. We want our dealers to understand what that shipping cost is before they make that purchase, so they can go directly on the exchange and there's no charge for them just to get a quote, right? So they can go in and say, all right, the average rate out of that market to my market is going to be X amount of dollars. So if I plug that into my purchase price, all right, I can move that car at that rate. Let's go throw it out there. If you want to throw it out there for 30% less, then you're probably not going to move that vehicle very quickly, right? So you got the market dictates what the rate is. And whether you're dealing with a broker or dealing with an asset-based carrier or working on a marketplace like ours, the market's going to dictate how quickly that vehicle moves. And if you have the right tools to give you the right idea of what that market is, then it's going to set you up for success. And it's not necessarily about the exact cost to move the car. It's about what's the total cost of that transaction going to be for me.
Hey, everybody, one more time. Want to make sure you know about the Unfair Advantage Mastermind group going on at the Carolinas Association, right, Luke? You're going to be there.
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be speaking on Friday afternoon. I hope everybody's there. We're going to be talking about measurements and how it affects the people that work for you. But I can tell you this, the one thing that will affect you, other than the convention, is going to this mastermind group. Tracy and Troy, two really big friends of the show. There'll be tons of marketing. There'll be accountability. And those guys, man, I'm just telling you, the people in that room know what they're doing and they want you to get better. They're going to help you. So make sure you sign up. It's free, Jeff. It is freaking free.
Yep. Yeah, those are the best education sessions of every convention, are the hot topics, the dealer mastermind groups, the asking each other how you're doing what type situations. Man, they are by far where I get the most value when I go to a convention. So make sure you get out there a day early. Check it out.
I've seen, that totally makes sense. It's a true capitalistic exchange. I've seen this, and I don't know if you can even speak to this, but I've seen this on a couple of different sites lately where people have used a carrier from an exchange or whatever, and the car disappears, and there's bad actors out there stealing cars. Can you talk any about that?
I mean, it goes back to the vetting system, right? I mean, if we're using the proper tools, if the technology has the proper back office tools, you shouldn't run into that issue. right? So the technology that we're utilizing tracks the VIN of the trailer, the VIN of the tractor, and the licensing of the driver in that vehicle. So we will know prior to ever approving a carrier through the exchange if that's a legal, legitimate carrier. And it goes back to the whole double brokering concept that we were talking about earlier, right? Where you've got a carrier that doesn't have a brokerage authority sending it to somebody else. That's where these cars are disappearing because they don't even know who the hell they sent it to. Pardon my language.
That's all right.
But our system doesn't allow for that. So if a carrier is in our system and they're booking 50 loads a week, but they only have 2 trucks, but they're hitting weigh stations around the country, our system will flag that saying, hey, this particular DOT number has hit way too many weigh stations for 2 trucks to even legally do. Let's flag this as a double broker carrier, and it'll pull it directly out of our system. So it goes back to your vetting process, Luke. That's how cars are disappearing because the carrier themselves are not being vetted by the party that's booking the vehicle.
Man, sign me up. Sign me up on this.
And then there's if you ever sit outside your Mannheim, there's like mailboxes with like 15 million lock boxes hooked to a metal pole somewhere. Who knows who has the code to that lockbox with just keys jammed in there. Yeah, insane. I mean, if I just like freaking hung out down there around the shipper, I could probably pick off a few cars here and there.
Yeah, we can have some nice cars, Jeff.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, guys, let's give you an opportunity to tell everyone how they get a hold of you. What I want to ask first, and we're going to talk specifically about Autohauler Exchange for the last couple of minutes. Are you guys, are you regional or are you national? Like, I know you guys are based out of somewhere in the east side.
We're in Rochester, Michigan.
Okay. So is your service national? Like if I'm over here in California or Utah, are you guys functioning on this side of the country?
So it's the concept of the Autohauler Exchanges, and I'm gonna let Dana dive into it, but it's a little bit different than anything that's out there. We are a true B2B marketplace. We are not a load board. We are not a brokerage board. We do not get involved in the transaction. We provide the technology for shippers of vehicles to connect directly to vehicle haulers in a safe, vetted format. And then we'll handle the payment processing just to keep the process more streamlined, more efficient, more transparent for all parties involved. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah. So we talked about, using the word central dispatch, and it's not a word I like to use, but to give an example of a true marketplace, it's like an Amazon, right? I mean, you have a seller or a shipper. So the seller uploads their information. Hey, these vehicles moving from point A to point B. And then we have, so that's the shipper side, the seller side. And then we have the other portion of the exchange, which is the carrier side. So it's our vetted carriers, like we had said, and it's true carriers only. There's no brokers, anybody else on it. So it's just true carriers. They go through our vetting process.
Say that again.
And they're monitored 24/7.
Dana, you got to say that one more time. I want to make that a point because I think that's huge.
It's only shippers.
No brokers on the exchange.
Okay. That like Luke said at the beginning, that is the most infuriating thing in the world when I get a calls from Ready Logistics. And I'm like, dude, what? Or gosh, if I want, anyways, go ahead, keep going.
Yes. So there's no middleman here in this transaction. So the carriers are the ones who are seeing your vehicles, right? And like I said, it's continuous 24/7 monitoring. So even in the process, so say you upload some vehicles and hey, I need to pick up, today's the 19th. I need them delivered by, say the 25th. If that carrier, if they have any type of, if their insurance is going to expire, whether it's like cargo, liability, whatever it is, like it's monitored and they're no longer on the exchange if it's going to be expired within that time frame, and they're no longer allowed to see, they can't see those vehicles. They actually can't even be on our exchange. It automatically kicks them out. So they have a login password, everything, and it won't work until their insurance is updated. So the true carriers, they see what you're shipping and they literally check it out. They add to cart. They check out and then they receive all the information that you have provided. So it's a true partnership between the shippers and the carriers, really, because we need your information and the shipper is providing that information, right? So we need qualified, pickup and delivery information for those carriers, because once they receive that information, we want the process to be between you and the carrier, right? Once that does happen though, you receive the notification, right? if the vehicle has been booked, you have a carrier on it. You have your own portal into our system as a shipper. You see the carrier name, you see the driver's name, you see the driver's cell phone number, all that's visible and available for you. We also have availability if you wanted to see the insurance prior to, we have a record of that. You can go ahead and you have that record yourself of their insurance. So you can actually download that and save that, or we can send it out to you, whatever you'd like to have. And then now it's in the driver's hands, right? So the driver does provide a pickup and delivery date. And then once that process starts, you receive a tracking link, and it's a live tracking link to the driver. So you see where the driver is at all times. You can click on that 24/7 and you'll see where that driver is with your vehicles.
And back to that original point you made earlier, Luke, like if a driver's supposed to pick up on a Friday and you find out Monday that they didn't pick up, in our marketplace, as soon as a driver is assigned or carrier is assigned, you get that information emailed to you. There's a notification. You can log in and see what's in there, everything about the carrier. You're going to have driver phone numbers. You're going to have dispatcher phone numbers. You're going to have the MC, all the information on that carrier.
Yeah.
So if you want to call them and book them directly on the next one, that's up to you. Or you can just let the exchange manage the process for you. But you have all the details that you'll need to collaborate with that driver. So you don't have to worry about Monday morning, did that car get picked up? The exchange is going to notify you that, hey, driver checked in, vehicle's loaded, here's your pictures, driver's on the way, you get the tracking link, and you're just seeing that dot move across the map until delivered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Luke loves that micromanagement thing. He wants to be like on the phone with the guy, like, "Where's my Ford Focus? You don't got time to stop at Burger King. No, you stop. I see you're stopping.
The
Don't
beauty
stop."
of it is you don't have to make a phone call. The process is digitized for you. The only time you'd ever want to call is if there was an issue in transit. If somebody's falling behind, the system will flag it, let you know. And the driver has your information. They're going to have your whoever's handling that receivership of that vehicle. You're going to want to put that information in when you market that vehicle so the driver can communicate with the receiver of that vehicle.
So am I paying you guys a monthly fee as a dealer to be on your platform, or are you just do I pay a fee on each booking?
It's a fee on each booking. There's a transactional fee that goes through. It's about a third of what a brokerage fee would be. Typical brokerage fee in the industry is much higher than what we would charge. I don't want to get into those numbers because some people charge more than us.
But
it's a set rate, you see it, and it's not for using the exchange, it's for when a vehicle's actually picked up and delivered.
When a vehicle's actually picked up and delivered. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So
we pay y'all a fee when that happens. Okay.
We were talking about central dispatch. I pay a fee regardless, right? Just to like have a login, and I've used them twice, and I've been paying for like 2 years, right? So I would love to have a place where, yes, I don't need you all the time, but when I do need, I want to have a marketplace I can go to without paying this monthly fee.
That's exactly what we've done. There's no subscription fee. There's no annual fee. It's when you move a vehicle successfully through the exchange, you pay the fee. That's it.
I'm signing up today.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool, guys. Anything else? How do we get a hold of you? The .com is.
Go ahead, Dana.
Autohaulerexchange.com.
Autohaulerexchange.com. Luke's going to sign up. He's going to report back to us. Let us know how it goes. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Dana, Royce, great information. I think all dealers are going to learn something. I've definitely learned something.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being with us.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having us, guys.
Dealers helping dealers. Please leave us a review and subscribe. The Independent Dealer Podcast.